The wind that morning did not scream. It whispered softly like the voice of someone already gone. William Hayes stood at the edge of his old farmhouse, staring into the distance. His eyes were tired. His face was lined and dry from years of sun and sadness. 2 years had passed since his wife Clara died, yet the pain felt fresh every morning. Every morning when he looked at her grave just a few steps from the house under the apple tree that hadn't bloomed since the day she was buried. The house behind him looked just as tired as he did. The roof leaned. The paint was peeling. The windows were dusty and quiet, like they had seen too much and could no longer care. The barn hadn't been painted in years. The place was falling apart, piece by piece. Just like William's heart after Clara passed, he still wore her wedding ring on a leather cord around his neck. At night, he sometimes held it tight and whispered her name. It never answered, but he whispered anyway. That morning, he saddled his old horse, Millie, and rode toward the back hills. A storm had passed the night before and he needed to check the fences. The wind blew gently. Birds flew low. The land was quiet, too quiet. Even the animals seemed to stay away. It made William uneasy. It was not a peaceful silence. It felt like something was waiting, something sad. Then he smelled it. Smoke. Not from a chimney. It was old but strong. Burnt wood. Ash. Something had caught fire not long ago. He kicked Millie gently and followed the smell. His horse stopped near a small path where the trees split. William got down. His boots sank a little into the soft ground. The wind carried the smell, sharper now. He walked slowly, and then he saw it. A wagon, or what was left of it. It had burned down to its frame. The wood was gone, turned to black ash. The wheels were broken and scattered. It looked like bones left after a fire. The earth around it was scorched and silent. William looked around. No one was there. Not at first. Then came the sound. A tiny whimper, so soft he almost missed it. He turned his head and heard it again, weak, like a cry from someone with no strength left. He moved toward it, heart beating faster. Behind the wagon, in a shallow ditch, he found them. 2 little girls. They lay close together, covered in mud and frost. Their clothes were torn, their skin pale and cold. One had her arm around the other, trying to keep her warm. Their faces were round and soft but tired. They didn't look hurt from fire. They looked hurt from fear, hunger, and walking too far with no one to help them. The younger one clutched a half-burnt doll in her small hand. William dropped to his knees. His old bones ached as he bent, but he didn't care. He reached out and touched the older girl's shoulder. She flinched, but didn't scream. He took off his coat and wrapped it around them both. "What happened to you?" he whispered. Then he saw it. A small paper pinned to the doll's torn dress. He took it and read the words written in faint pencil. "Not mine. Keep if you want." His chest felt tight. He stared at the note, then at the girls. They were dirty, scared and silent. No shoes, blisters on their feet. Their faces were red from crying. They were around 6 years old. One of them moved her lips without sound. William leaned in. "Daisy," she whispered. Then the other girl held the doll closer and whispered, "June." They had names. He stood up, took a few steps toward his horse. His hand touched the saddle. Horn. He could leave. Let someone else find them. It wasn't his job. He had enough sadness. He had buried enough pain. But then the wind came again, low and soft, like Clara's voice whispering his name. He turned back. He couldn't leave them. With a long breath, William bent down again. He lifted both girls, one in each arm. They were heavier than they looked, like carrying full sacks of flour, but with broken hearts inside. He placed them gently on the horse and climbed up behind them. The girls leaned into his chest. One tiny hand grabbed his shirt. The ride back was slow, quiet. The house looked smaller as they neared it. Cold, tired, but waiting. The apple tree still had no blooms. The rose bush on Clara's grave was dry and brown. But as William stepped down from the horse and carried the girls inside, something stirred inside him. A small voice. A tiny spark. Maybe, just maybe. This was not the end. Maybe. This was the start of something he didn't know he needed. The house was quiet, but not the kind of quiet that brings peace. It was the kind of quiet that comes when pain is hiding behind every wall. William carried the two girls inside. The air was cold. The wood floor creaked under his boots. He laid them gently on an old quilt near the fireplace. He added more wood and lit the fire, watching as the flames grew and filled the room with a little light and warmth. The girls didn't speak. They sat huddled close, still wrapped in his coat, their eyes wide and scared. William didn't ask questions. Not yet. He didn't want to scare them more. Instead, he walked to the kitchen and opened an old can of beans. He fried up some bacon. The smell filled the room, strong and rich, but the girls didn't move. They didn't look hungry, but he could see they were. Daisy looked at the food, then at June. She waited. June stared at the floor, not touching anything. It wasn't until William sat back in his chair and looked away that Daisy slowly reached for a strip of bacon. She tore a small piece and handed it to her sister. They ate like they were afraid it would be taken away. Quiet, quick, small bites. That night, William made them a bed near the fire. He gave them 2 old blankets and one of Clara's patchwork, quilts. The quilt had soft blue flowers sewn into it. Clara had made it by hand before she got sick. William hesitated before letting them use it, but something told him Clara wouldn't have minded. He didn't have much else to offer. He left the door to his bedroom open. He wanted them to feel safe. In the middle of the night, he heard small footsteps, bare feet on cold wood. Then the mattress dipped slightly. He didn't turn around, but he felt them climb into the bed, one on each side. Small bodies, cold but breathing. They didn't speak. They just wanted to be near someone. William stared at the dark ceiling, eyes wide open, and felt the weight of them beside him. It had been a long time since he shared the bed with anyone, but he didn't move. He didn't say a word. Just let them stay. The next morning, William got up early and made oatmeal. He added honey for sweetness. Daisy came into the kitchen first. She stood in the doorway holding the melted doll. June followed a minute later. Neither of them smiled, but they ate the oatmeal without kneading. A push this time. William didn't know what to say. He had never been good with children. He and Clara had wanted kids, but it never happened. Clara used to say, "When the time is right, they'll come." But the time never came. Until now, maybe. He showed them how to feed the chickens. He held out the grain and watched as they slowly copied him. Daisy was curious. She laughed once, when a chicken jumped. June stayed quiet but watched everything. She didn't talk, but her eyes were sharp. She stayed close to Daisy, always. The days passed slowly. The girls still didn't speak much, but they began to move around the house more. Daisy followed William when he worked in the garden. She helped him carry water. June swept the porch with a broom twice her size. They didn't ask questions, but they looked at him with a quiet trust, like they were waiting for him to change his mind and send them away. One afternoon, Daisy brought him a little flower she had found in the yard. It was wilted, but she held it out with both hands like it was something special. "For Clara," she whispered. It was the first time she spoke his wife's name. William felt something deep in his chest shift. He took the flower and placed it gently on the windowsill above the kitchen sink. That night, William sat at Clara's grave. The sky was turning pink with sunset. The rose bush still looked dry, no bloom. But it didn't matter. He wasn't alone anymore. He spoke softly to the ground, as if Clara could still hear. "They're not mine," he said, "but they're here, and I think they need me." Inside the house, the girls were sitting by the fire, the doll between them. Daisy had her arm around June, the same way she had in the ditch that day. William watched them from the door. They didn't look like strangers anymore. They looked like they belonged. And even though he hadn't planned for it, even though the pain of losing Clara still lived in every corner of the house, William felt something small and warm beginning to grow again. It wasn't joy. Not yet. But maybe. It was the start. The cold came early that year. By the time the first snow fell, the girls had been living with William for almost a month. The quiet farmhouse was no longer so quiet. Footsteps now filled the halls. Soft giggles sometimes echoed from the kitchen. The fireplace was almost always burning, and for the first time in 2 years, the warmth inside the house wasn't just from the fire. It came from life, from breath, from the 2 little souls that had somehow landed in William's care. But just as things were starting to feel better, the cold brought something else, something darker. It started with June's cough. At first it was small, sharp, but short. William noticed it while she was helping him stack wood near the shed. She bent over to pick up a log and coughed into her sleeve. He stopped and looked at her. "You all right?" he asked gently. She nodded, eyes tired but brave. June always tried to be strong, always hiding behind silence and stillness. William wasn't sure how long she had been coughing. Maybe days, maybe longer. By the evening, her cheeks were red. Her breathing got slower. Her small hands trembled when she held the spoon at dinner. Daisy noticed too. She didn't say a word, but her eyes didn't leave her sister. That night, June didn't get out of bed. William touched her forehead. It was burning. His heart sank. He wrapped her in extra blankets and sat by her side. The doll she always held was now under her arm. Her eyes opened once. She looked up at him and whispered, "Don't let go." Her voice was so small it nearly broke him. William stood and grabbed his coat. He told Daisy to stay by the fire and keep warm. She nodded, holding June's other hand tightly. The town was 5 miles away. Snow was thick on the ground. The wind was sharp, cutting across his face like glass, but he didn't stop. He rode hard, his chest tight with fear. The road was slippery, trees bent under heavy snow. But William didn't care. His girl was sick. She needed help. He wouldn't let her slip away, not after everything. He arrived in town just after dark. He burst through the door of the small doctor's house, boots wet, eyes wild. "She's burning with fever," he said. "She's 6. She's got no one but me." The doctor packed his bag, gave William some medicine and blankets, and offered to ride back with him. William shook his head. "I'll take care of it," he said, and he did. He returned home close to midnight. Daisy was still awake, curled beside June. William knelt down and gave the medicine carefully, drop by drop. Then he sat beside the fire, watching, waiting. The night was long. June moaned in her sleep. Her face was pale. But slowly, by morning, her breathing calmed. The fever broke. William didn't sleep that night. The next day, June opened her eyes. She looked around and whispered, "Daisy." Her sister grabbed her hand and nodded. William knelt beside them. He smiled for the first time in weeks. "You scared me," he said softly. June blinked at him. Her lips moved carefully. "Are we going to stay here?" she asked. William didn't answer at first. He looked out the window at the snow, then back at the 2 girls. He nodded. "Yes," he said, "if you want to." June turned her face toward the fire. "We do." Later that week, William brought in an old Christmas tree from the shed. It was dusty and crooked, but it still stood. Daisy found some ribbons in the drawer and helped him tie them onto the branches. They used buttons and dried orange slices. June helped too, sitting wrapped in a blanket. They didn't have much, but it felt like everything. One evening, as snow fell outside and the fire crackled gently, Daisy crawled into William's lap. She leaned her head on his chest and whispered, "You saved us." William didn't speak. His hand rested gently on her back. The room was quiet again, but this time it was a warm quiet. A peaceful one. That night before he went to bed, William stood by Clara's grave. The rosebush still hadn't bloomed, but the ground was covered in snow, soft like cotton, and the stars above were brighter than usual. He closed his eyes and whispered, "They're not mine by blood, Clara, but I think you sent them, and I think they're mine now." In the stillness, it felt like she was listening. The wind blew harder that morning, but it didn't sound lonely anymore. It danced through the trees and whistled across the fields like a song. Spring had finally arrived. The snow was melting, and soft green shoots had started to break through the cold ground. For the first time in many months, William heard the sound of birds returning. Life was waking up again. Inside the old farmhouse, laughter filled the kitchen. Daisy stood on a stool, helping William mix pancake batter. She stirred, too fast, and splashed some onto the table. "Oops," she giggled. William pretended to be shocked. "You making pancakes or a pancake storm?" Daisy laughed louder. Her cheeks were pink and full of light. June sat at the table, drawing with a broken crayon. Her face was calm, her eyes steady. She didn't talk much, but her silence no longer felt afraid. She looked peaceful, like someone who had finally found home. It had been almost 3 months since William found them in that cold ditch. Since then, everything had changed. He no longer woke up with heavy sadness in his chest. He no longer sat alone by the fire at night. The girls had brought something back into his life that he thought was gone forever. Purpose. And love. Not the same kind he had with Clara, but something just as strong. Something he didn't expect to find again. After breakfast, the girls helped him feed the chickens and gather eggs. They chased each other around the yard, laughing, their bare feet tapping on the new grass. William watched from the porch, his hands resting on his knees, a small smile on his face. He remembered when the house used to feel like a prison. Now it felt like a home again. Later that day, he took them to town. He had avoided it for a while, afraid of the questions. People knew Clara had died. People knew he had no children. And now, here he was, walking into the small store with 2 little girls holding his hands. They looked up at him with trust. He held their hands tightly. Some of the townspeople stared. Some smiled gently. One woman whispered, "Are those his grandkids?" But nobody asked directly. They could see enough in William's eyes, enough to understand that something important had happened, something real. At the counter, the store owner smiled kindly. "You've got yourself some helpers there," he said. William nodded. "Yeah," he replied. "They help me remember how to live." On the way back home, the girls fell asleep in the wagon, heads resting on each other's shoulders. William looked at them and felt his throat tighten. He had saved them, but the truth was, they had saved him too. That evening, as the sun dropped low, William walked with the girls to the back of the house, to Clara's grave. He had never brought them there before. He wasn't sure why. Maybe he wasn't ready. But now, it felt like the right time. He stopped in front of the wooden cross. The rosebush beside it, dead all winter, had one single bud. Just one. But it was enough. "This is Clara," he said gently. "She was my wife. She's the reason I know what love means." The girls stood quiet. Daisy bent down and placed a small flower she had picked beside the grave. "Hi, Clara," she whispered. "Thank you for him." William felt his eyes burn. He looked up at the sky, blinking hard. They stood there together for a long moment. No one spoke. The wind moved through the trees. It didn't feel cold. It felt like a whisper of someone watching, someone proud. Later that night, as they sat by the fire, Daisy climbed into William's lap like she had done many times before. She looked up at him with serious eyes. "Can we stay forever?" she asked. William didn't answer right away. He looked down at June, curled up with her doll, her eyes already closed. He looked around the room. The same room that had once felt empty. It was full now. Full of warmth. Full of life. Yes, he said softly. You're home now. Then Daisy did something she hadn't done before. She leaned up and whispered, I love you, Daddy. William's heart stopped for a second. He hadn't heard that word in years, not from anyone. He closed his eyes and held her close. I love you too, sweetheart, he said. Outside, under the moonlight, the rose bush opened its first bloom. And deep in William's heart, something opened too. Something he thought had died with Clara. But it hadn't. It had just been waiting. Waiting for two little miracles to bring it back to life.